Hi, and welcome to a Sunny Book Nook. My name is Sunny, and today I wanted to bring to you some diverse speculative and science fiction fantasy short story collections and anthologies. I have a bit of a stack over here, and I have other books I would like to talk about that fall under this category, but that I don't physically own. If you want me to do like a part two of this video with books that I don't own that aren't in my collection or my shelves, then let me know, or an updated list once I've read more from my collection and my physical TBR, etc. Please let me know. And I know people were asking me for just short story collection recommendations in general. If speculative fiction and SFF aren't your thing, I will also be making like a more literary fiction type short story collection book recommendation video as well, so stick around for that. You should subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much to all of the patrons who have joined me on Patreon to help support my channel and to get an extra video a month, some other perks for various tier levels, including personalized book recommendations and you giving me recommendations that I will be confirmed to read, as well as some postcards I can send to you with book recommendations on them. But anyways, that being said, let's just get into these books. They are all by women or LGBTQ people or authors of color, so I am really excited to share with you these books. Some of these I read quite a few years ago at this point, so if I don't have the best summary of them, I still hope that I can pitch them to you well. I think I'm gonna go in order of shortest book in general to longest book, and yeah, let's just get right into it. The first book I want to talk about is Friday Black by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah. This book is a pretty short collection, and it's from one author, of course, and the stories vary in length. There's one that's like 1 page long, and there's others that are a bit longer and would probably function more as like novellas, I would say. But all of these stories really interrogate the realities of like Black life in America and what that looks like in various situations, in futures and in these alternate realities and in worlds that feel very similar to ours but with an extra element to it or a more extreme version of something that already happens. There's a short story in here about people who go on rampages, like murdering random white people as vengeance for the random murders of Black people. There is a short story that involves a simulated sort of reality in which actors, including our main character in that story, a Black man, has to pretend to be in situations in which clients, mostly white people, can justify inflicting racial violence on them within these simulated situations. The title short story is Friday Black, of course, and I think that one has to do with a Black Friday sale gone wrong or like very extreme. All of these stories look at the Black experience and capitalism and racial capitalism and consumerism, how these things affect people's interpersonal relationships as well as people's relationships with themselves and their identities and how they feel. It also talks a lot about like history and formations of them, specifically in the story The Era. Most of these are like, I guess, set in like a vague future, I would say, and it is very well written and has concepts that are delivered very intelligently, I would say. A lot of these are more dialogue heavy and they're just very thinky, and I would say like most of these stories are pretty short because it's a short book in general, but I think it's pretty damn brilliant, and I read this quite a few years ago at this point. I think this is probably one of the first books I ever read that was a short story collection of like science fiction fantasy, maybe. I think it was like this and then some Ken Liu, The Paper Menagerie and other stories, I think, that I read after getting into like Ray Bradbury short stories that like really stuck out to me. So this will always have like a special place in my heart. I really want to revisit some of the short stories in here because they are quite smart and quite pacey, I would say. And yeah, I really enjoyed this, and I would definitely recommend it if you're looking for a sort of like Afrofuturist dystopia type of book. It's written in this very almost like choppy way. It's sort of disjointed in some elements and feels short and blunt, and like all of these stories and their structures. So yeah, definitely check that out if that sounds interesting to you. The next book I want to talk about is Love After the End, which is an anthology of Indigenous queer two-spirit literature, and it features a bunch of different authors that you may have heard of, including like Darcy Little Badger, and it's edited by Joshua Whitehead, Nathan Adler, Mari Karusato, just a good selection of a bunch of different authors that I hadn't heard of before. And it's a lot of featuring like young people as main characters, I would say. A lot of these stories are, again, like set in a dystopian sort of future that I find really compelling. And I think that these narratives and the world building and the structures of these various stories are so interesting. Some of these stories like deal with storytelling itself as like a community building thing. Some of them feature, a lot of these feature like closed communities and just communities and how they function or dysfunction. And I think that a lot of these are quite brilliant and expansive and tell stories of like families or young girls or, you know, trans kids or gay kids just like living on spaceships or being on an island, or a list of things for like a native girl's survival guide. A lot of very interesting short stories in here. Centers various indigenous tribes and nations and communities, specific language and identities, and yeah, it's very, very enlightening and expansive in the types of stories, in the nations of the author's writing, in the queer representation, and the way that it tackles or addresses or imagines settler colonialism and the aftermath of it, you know, love after the end, right? And how, you know, we currently live in a post-apocalyptic landscape for most Indigenous people here where I live in the United States of America, and what that looks like from a fictional lens and the future beyond this. Or, you know, it's just, that's what I love about speculative fiction. I think this anthology really brings together the things that I love most about the genre and features a wide range of LGBT, two-spirit, queer, Indigenous authors and voices. The next short story collection I want to talk about is a little bit more hyped, and that is Ted Chiang's Exhalation. And I also have, or I think I let my friend borrow, and I don't even know where it is anymore, his other short story collection, Story of Your Life and Others. And that title short story was what Arrival was adapted from, the, I think 2016 movie. Girl, I don't even remember. But anyways, this is, I think, my preferred book between his two. And he is a Chinese American science fiction author who is quite prolific, and his ideas and the way that he conveys them, oh my gosh, it's mind-blowing. I think my favorite short story, maybe like ever, is found in here. It's called The Truth of Fact, The Truth of Feeling, and I really try to make everyone in my life who is even semi-interested in this type of story read that short story, because it does that thing that Ted Chiang does, right? Where he explores the linguistic concepts of time and memory and identity shaping and like how language informs all of that, right? Which is the key sort of element of Arrival as a movie and the short story it was based off. But The Truth of Fact, The Truth of Feeling was just so incredible because it's about a father-daughter relationship in which technology obviously is a huge element of this, in which it has changed the way that people are able to, you know, view the world, because no longer do people have to type in order to convey messages, because typing is sort of just like an elevated technological reality of handwriting, you know? And so instead everyone has like, you know, like contact lenses or chips in their brains that allows them to communicate their thoughts through like feelings and images and vibes. And so that's how people communicate, essentially. Like, it's a universal form of communication in a way that like emails and texts used to be. Emails and texts in this universe, in this short story, are essentially obsolete. And our father character is a journalist. And so we alternate perspectives, or we alternate sort of between him talking about his relationship with his daughter and how changes in communication and technology has affected it, and his rocky relationship with her previously, and a short story that he wrote about a European missionary visiting an African village, basically like as first contact, and how oral traditions of storytelling within this African village, which is fictional by the way, adjusts and changes as one of the boys from the village learns how to read and write, and introduces the concept of written language into this culture. So it is so fascinating. I loved it so much. And the other short stories in here, the first one I also really enjoy. It's called The Merchant and the Alchemist's Gate, and it's set in this like old-timey type story, I guess, and it's about like this gate in which a merchant can go through and enter sort of a different reality, and I really enjoyed that one as well. A lot of these stories in here were just so fascinating. There was one about like digital pets that was interesting. There's some stories in here that deal with like the concept of religion and spirituality, and a lot that has to do with like family, I would say. And some of them are like quite short as well. And I would say because I love The Truth of Fact, The Truth of Feeling so much, I would enjoy this book more than Story of Your Life and Others. But Story of Your Life and Others has some really great ones in there as well. But yeah, I just love Ted Chiang's writing and his mind, and the stories that like hit with me and like really got me. So this is a book that I would definitely recommend if you're looking for, you know, that lineage of like Chinese American or Chinese authors of science fiction that is so, it's just like booming, you know? It's always been there and it's always been so amazing, but this, I think, I don't know, I just really enjoy it, and I get that it's hyped, but I'm adding to it. I'm contributing to the hype. The next book I want to recommend is not an anthology, but rather from one author, Jo Walton, Starlings. And Jo Walton, she's a magnificent writer, I would say. I've only read a couple of her books, but I really enjoyed her book Lent, and that is a historical fantasy novel that sort of reimagines this like 15th, 16th century Catholic Church stuff about this priest who like historically did exist and alleged to be able to see demons in order to cast them out, but she sort of reimagines as like, okay, he actually can see demons, and what do they look like and how does that work? And it also has to do with like life and death and the cycle of that and hell, and it's just so interesting. But anyways, Starlings is a really quirky and fun short story collection from Jo Walton that I adore, and particularly the short story in here that is my favorite is called Sleeper, and it's set in a future in like London or something, and it's about this woman who works at a like book publishing company, and she's writing this biography of this man's life who lived through the late 20th century, mid 20th century, and it's about how she creates this virtual reality sort of like hologram of him and how she interacts with it as the biography writer. So fascinating. I love that story so much. It has this like socialist bent that's so, oh my god, it's so satisfying to me. And yeah, there's a story in here that's like so fucking funny as well. It's told in like a play format. Yeah, it's called Three Shouts on a Hill. I really like that one too. A lot of these like play on existing tropes of like fantasy and, you know, also some like dystopian future stuff and some just examinations of technology and AI as it exists now. There's one that I thought was really smart and very short that is from the perspective of like Google as a search engine, or like a general search engine that people use, and sort of the morality of it as it emerges as a conscious like being, I guess, and the inevitability of that. I thought it was so fantastic, and yeah, I don't know, I really love her writing, and I thoroughly enjoy this short story collection. The next book I want to talk about is future tense fiction, Stories of Tomorrow, and this is an anthology of a bunch of authors that you've heard of: Carmen Maria Machado, Emily St. John Mandel, Mark Oshiro, and I think one of my favorites in this collection is the first short story in here that is by Nnedi Okorafor, and as you would imagine, it is a very diverse selection of like authors and voices, types of stories, and like the themes that they explore. There's a lot of like exploration of course, technology and family, and how the relationship between these things affects, you know, the way people live and how they navigate life. The first short story, which I mentioned, Loving, is about like a house that has been built to walk around and be mobile, but it's, you know, like essentially like this giant piece of robotic technology, and it's featuring this woman who is pregnant, but her husband has been cheating on her, and so she like kicked him out, and the whole village, I think it's set in Nigeria, a lot of Nnedi Okorafor's books are, the whole village and the whole town is aware of the bullshit that's occurring, and it makes her like the stamped woman, the marked woman of the group. But it's also set in a future in which the rice fields that are being grown and the particular like seed of it has been creating a specific type of pollen allergy that is very, very lethal and dangerous to our main character. And I really enjoyed that one. There's another short story in here, When the Robot and Crow Saved East St. Louis. Loved that one so much. As you would imagine, it's like set in a future in which there's these robots that allow people to like, blow their nose and throw it away and, sanitize their hands in order, just like wandering around for public safety and health. And then there's these crows that are very intelligent and can communicate, of course, with humans and the robot. And they have to prevent like some sort of pathological virus or something. And yeah, so many amazing stories in here, a lot of them having to deal with like grief and family and of course communication and technology. Just so interesting. I really loved a lot of these, and a lot of these authors you'll get a first taste of if you haven't read them before, and then you can go on to explore by yourself. But I think there were some other ones, there were some short stories in here from authors that I have read before that I thought a little bit weak, but still worth reading just for the stories that I really enjoyed in them alone. But yeah, I read this like a couple years ago at this point as well, so I'm probably not remembering all the best details and the other things about this that I really did enjoy, but I would definitely recommend you checking it out if that sounds at all interesting to you. Next up, I have Even Greater Mistakes by Charlie Jane Anders, and she is a trans woman writer, and she's written for various TV shows and pretty prolifically, but this is a short story collection that I really enjoyed. I think I mentioned it pretty recently in a wrap-up. These short stories are full of humor and wit and touching at the like heart of humanity and how people relate to each other on various levels as romantic partners or as friends or as a queer poly housing community, or just like these just fantastic examinations of the human condition, right? But it's also again very funny. I think some of my favorite short stories in here is one that is like basically a novella that is a lot of like slapstick humor, but in the face of like increasingly fascist violence of a brutal American landscape and like a slapstick comedy filmmaker duo. There's one that was like more fantasy based that I thought was really cool. That was and funny. It was called Fairy Werewolf versus Vampire Zombie or something like that. Anyway, very fun. A lot of these stories, but not all of them, feature a really central element of queerness, and a lot of these are post-apocalyptic. And yeah, again, another embodiment of what I love so much about science fiction and fantasy. And yeah, I think her work does explore like technology, but less so than other books that I've talked about today. Less so about the minutia of it and how it operates and like the morality of it, and more so of like how it really affects. I don't know, maybe that's an unfair statement to make. There's also a short story in here that is about a woman who is like the last woman on Earth ostensibly and has a genie in the bottle and like what she does with it, and she's a playwright. So yeah, I really enjoyed this, and I would definitely recommend it if you're into heartfelt humor, I guess, and science fiction. The Hidden Girl and Other Stories by Ken Liu is a fantastic and mind-blowing short story collection. I think all of these short stories, well, not all of them, but a lot of these could be compared to like Black Mirror, but I think this one could be compared to Black Mirror like the most, probably. Well, I don't know what I'm saying. Basically, in this short story collection, we are following a lot of different families and perspectives and point of views and, types of writing as usual, typical, right? But my favorites in this are The Gods Will Not Be Chained, which is about a girl whose father has died but who's been uploaded into like a cloud, I think. I love the short story Real Artists, about a girl who wants to make movies and is a fantastic filmmaker and gets invited to her favorite like production company to learn what goes on behind scenes, and what she discovers is stuff that's interesting. And there's a short story called Maxwell's Demon that's set in a historical setting. I think that Ken Liu plays with like past and future worlds and like dystopias and just like real life history and ghostly imaginings that are so fascinating and so interesting to see play out. Maxwell's Demon is about a soldier who takes on this Okinawan girl and the demonic and ghostly presence that comes with her, and it's about like imperialism and like sexual violence and the military from this historical lens that has like, you know, a touch of fantasy, I would say. And we also see the short story that I found so interesting that sort of went in the past and in the future in like vignettes and snippets of time from like one family and one lineage and how we imagine history. I thought so many of these were fantastic and brilliant and mind-blowing. And there were others in here that were a bit more mid for me, or skips, I would guess, or I would say. But yeah, I really enjoyed this in general, and that is my last and biggest book I want to talk about today. I hope you got at least one recommendation among this stack of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7. And if you have read any of these, please let me know down in the comments what you thought of them, what your favorite short stories from these collections were, and if you haven't, which ones sound most appealing to you. But that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I would really appreciate it if you became a patron, if you have the means or whatever. And if not, if you liked and subscribed, and if you want to friend me on Goodreads, go ahead and do that. Link in the description, and all my social media is always linked down below as well. But be warned, I am a little bit crazy on like Twitter specifically. So that's all I have for you today. I'll see you in my next video, hopefully. Bye.